Joe Rogan and the farmer's dog have partnered together, and in this video we are going to take a look at their partnership and whether the farmer's dog is something for you to consider. Now, I was watching Joe's podcast the other day, and it is very true that he has made quite a few references to dog food and his dog Marshall, his golden retriever, and how he emphasizes on good food for his dog and for dogs overall.
By the way, folks, feed your dog real food. So many people are feeding their dog kibble. That stuff, the reason why it can sit on the shelf for so long is because it's not real food. Yeah, it's garbage.
And he's a very big advocate for fitness, wellness, and overall eating better. And so it really caught my eye when the farmer's dog made an appearance. And like many of you, I went to the website and I started scrolling. And since we specialize in nutrition, we want to give you the full scoop and an expert opinion on whether this is good or bad. We are going to give you the pros, the cons, and we are going to explore some alternatives from raw dog food. We are going to compare it to kibble, and we will also be answering questions like, is it cheaper for you to make this at home? Now, the first thing I want to say is that this is not a sponsored video. Virtually every single article you see and every single video you watch seems to be sponsored by this company or other very similar companies, and I just want to say that this video hasn't been sponsored, so this is just our own opinions, which is quite refreshing if you ask me. Now, the farmer's dog is a subscription dog food service where you input all the details for your dog and they custom tailor some recipes and they send them to your door on a regular basis. The best way I can describe it is HelloFresh but for dogs. So you go on their website, you give your dog's age, weight, body type, activity levels, special considerations, and they draft up recipes for you. And they do have quite a lot in terms of education and write articles about nutrition and the different things you need to pay attention to whenever it comes to raw food, whenever it comes to fresh food, and whenever it comes to kibble. And they do their best to explain why fresh is better than kibble. So the first pro I see from any of these subscription services is that they emphasize on fresh food, and they emphasize that kibble might not be the best option for your dog. If you think about it, kibble has an extremely long shelf life, and dark pellets might not be very nutritious for your dog. With fresh food, things take a bit of a turn, because whenever you see fresh food and real food and your dog eating it, that seems to be a bit more appropriate than burnt brown pellets. And so that can be the first thing that you want to be considering if you want to switch from kibble to something fresh. The second pro I see from some of these recipes is the lack of some of the most egregious ingredients we see in commercial pet food these days. I mean, the state of commercial pet food is absolutely ridiculous. We see wheat gluten, corn protein meal, we see barley, we see soy, we see natural flavors and meat and animal derivatives. And those aren't the best for your dog. Those are absolutely ridiculous for your dog. Even the veterinary prescription diets contain some of these corn protein meals and whole maize or corn. So the fact that for a lot of these recipes, you can actually see organ meat, you can see muscle meat, you can see certain veggies, and you can see things that are actually foods and ingredients that you can identify and are familiar with, that is surely another advantage. So the lack of filler and the lack of inflammatory and vague ingredients is certainly something to be cheered on. And the last pro I see from this is the convenience. I mean, the convenience these days tends to be one of the biggest things for us. Now, you will be paying a bit more, but you will receive this with regularity to your doorstep, and having that problem solved for you is definitely something to cheer. Now to some of the cons, because all that glitter is not gold. Now the first thing I do not like, and this has to do with the nutrition, is that you only get 50% meat and organ meat within the recipes, with everything else being vegetables and maybe some fiber. Now do not get me wrong, if you come from the commercial kibble world where the meat content is really subpar and very minimal, this is clearly a step up. However, when you are paying good money for a service, you want to be paying for meat. You do not want to be paying for filler. And a pound of lean muscle meat is always going to be a lot more expensive than a pound of chickpeas or a pound of kale, broccoli, or whatever else. So if you ask me, I would rather have them include a lot more meat than 50%. There is also the case that whenever, and you can try this at home, whenever you cook meat at home, that meat is going to shrink a little bit. So the 50% might not be 50% after it's been cooked. Whereas vegetables, certain legumes, for example, like chickpeas or lentils, tend to expand whenever you cook them. So if you are getting 50% vegetables, some of those vegetables might end up being a greater proportion of the actual recipe than 50%, and that's not really good, because again, this is a premium service and you want to be paying for meat. You don't want to be paying for filler, which leads me on to my next con, which is the price. The price is very expensive. You pay for convenience and you pay for something which is quite tech heavy. It's a subscription service. They tailor your plan and they make you feel like you are being catered to, when in reality all these recipes tend to be fairly standard and it is what it is. So the price is definitely a bit more of a consideration and it can be a bit of a sticking point for certain people. Third con, and this is a particular pet peeve of mine, as with HelloFresh, I mean, everything is a subscription these days, and some people might not enjoy having yet another subscription and be subscribed to yet another service. So again, that's something you need to pay attention to, and that's something you need to consider before giving this a try or not. To the question, is this better than raw food? Well, no, it isn't. If you think about it, raw food is minimally processed and it's more biologically appropriate than a lot of these services. If raw food is done correctly, maybe you'll see something like 5 to 10% vegetables maximum. Everything else will be meat, organ and bone, which should comprise the bulk of your dog's diet. We want to be keeping vegetables and any other fillers to an absolute minimum, to a bare minimum. If you ask me, anything over 10% vegetables, you are then paying too much for filler. Again, with these things, you want to be paying for meat. You don't want to be paying for vegetables. To the question, is it better for you to do this at home? Well, yes, it is. It's going to be a lot cheaper, a hell of a lot cheaper. However, you do have to pay attention to the right ratios. You do have to educate yourself. We see so many people who add things like brown rice or stuff that doesn't really do anything for our dogs. So if you are going to DIY the food, I rather you educate yourself first. Is it cheaper? Yes, you can absolutely buy things individually and then serve them to your dog for a lot cheaper. However, you do have to educate yourself. And by the way, if you are interested about dog nutrition, you can totally download for free our How to Feed Your Dog Properly. It's an invaluable guide that will tell you whether you are doing things correctly, and you can download it for free below. So what is the verdict? The verdict is that if this is your first incursion into fresh food, and this is the first time you realize there is something better than kibble, or something alternative than kibble, and you have been listening to the podcast and you want to give these guys a try, well, if the kibble you currently consume is a lower quality one or a veterinary prescription diet, this food is totally going to be a lot better than those veterinary prescription diets or commercial kibble. However, there are levels to kibble. kibble, and some kibbles are absolutely wonderful while some are truly trash. So is it better than kibble? It does depend. Is it better than raw food? If you do raw food correctly, no, it won't be better than raw food. So if you have the money, you don't have the time, and you don't want any hassle, this could be a good option. However, if you want something better than this, because this is still 50% meat, we want to be having more than 50% in our dog's diet comprised of meat. Everything else tends to be a bit of a filler. Then other options might be available, such as raw food or even certain kibbles that are cooked at very, very low temperatures, and they retain a lot more of the nutrients. And if you are really intrigued by raw food now and whether you should give it a go, then I highly encourage you to watch this video next.